In 1794, President George Washington visited an area called Harpers Ferry, and he ended up selecting it to be the second location for a national armory in the United States to produce and store weapons. By the time 1859 rolls around, the armory was heavily developed and producing thousands of weapons, and two buildings called arsenals were also developed in order to store the completed weapons while they awaited shipment. On October 16, 1859, John Brown, leading 21 abolitionists, raided the arsenal and armory, and they would hold it for 2 days until they were surrounded by a militia of Marines led by Colonel Robert E. Lee, which would result in the abolitionists being killed or captured. The impact of the raid was catastrophic. The tense relationship between northern and southern states spiraled into a worse condition, which would culminate in the start of the American Civil War. In late 1860, the Armory Superintendent Alfred Barber was concerned about the safety of the armory due to its production and storage of weapons, since this was clearly the reason why John Brown had targeted it during his raid, so he could capture weapons to give to slaves in order to cause an uprising. As a result, he would travel to Washington, D.C. to converse with the Ordnance Bureau about obtaining military presence on the armory grounds to keep it safe from another abolitionist raid, since rumors were persisting that more abolitionists were going to attempt raiding the armory. On January 2, 1861, he would write, "Have reason to apprehend that some assault will be made upon the U.S. Armory at Harpers Ferry. There is no regulatory organized defense for the post, little protection against assault of numerous force. The armory might be taken and destroyed. The arms might be abstracted and removed or destroyed. Vast amount of damage might be done to government property. Belief that a company or more of regular U.S. soldiers should be placed there very soon." The impact of this letter seemed to solidify the Ordnance Bureau's belief that the armory did in fact need protection, and thus they would order a small group of Union soldiers to take up post at the armory in order to defend it against any future raids. On the 3rd of January 1861, the Ordnance Bureau would order a company of drilled recruits to be sent to Harpers Ferry under the command of First Lieutenant Roger Jones, and Major General Henry J. Hunt would receive orders to assume the military command of the armory, to so dispose it as to prevent the success of an attack upon the U.S. property there, should one be attempted. This meant the Harpers Ferry Armory was now a military installation. For the remainder of the winter and the beginning of spring, both Jones and Hunt would petition for more troops to be sent to the armory, but the Ordnance Bureau would not comply. The reason the government would not send more troops is because they were afraid of increasing the tensions between the northern and southern states. They felt that more federal troops at the armory would show that they distrusted southern states, and thus would escalate tensions which the United States government was trying to stabilize and decrease. By the second week of April, the 62-man company had dwindled to 49 as a result of a few deaths, desertions, and dischargements, and this number would be further reduced a few days later when Major General Hunt, with a couple of members of the company, were selected to take part in the 5th Artillery at Fort Pickens, located in Florida. By that point, states in the South had already begun to secede from the Union, and on the 17th of April, 1861, Virginia would follow in suit as a result of President Abraham Lincoln calling on 75,000 volunteers to help control the South. Superintendent Barber was selected to take part in the Richmond Secession Convention, for which he voted against secession as he was a pro-Unionist. However, once Virginia seceded, his loyalty flopped and he would help the Confederacy. The day Virginia seceded, he began plotting with former Virginia Governor Henry Wise and a selection of officers from Fauquier and Jefferson counties about a plan to quickly take Washington, D.C. and end the war. At the center of this planning, Harpers Ferry was key, because he needed to capture the armaments located in the arsenal in order to supply the necessary amount of troops to carry out the operation. With Virginia's secession, Barber's role as superintendent of the armory would come to an end, and he was replaced by Captain Charles P. Kingsbury, whom would arrive at Harpers Ferry that same day. Shortly after Kingsbury arrived, Lieutenant Jones would confer with him about the undermanned garrison, and it was decided if the Confederacy attacked Harpers Ferry, the armory and arsenal would have to be destroyed in order to prevent it from falling into Confederate hands, since the 40-man garrison would have no chance of holding it. Their plan began to take shape that very night. They would enter the barracks and empty the mattresses of their contents and refill them with straw, wood, and coal, and then put approximately 100 pounds of gunpowder into each mattress. The explosive mattresses would be placed in the two arsenal buildings, since this is where completed firearms were being stored, and each mattress was connected by a trail of gunpowder, which could be lit and cause the mattresses to simultaneously explode, causing the greatest amount of destruction possible. The main buildings of the armory would have small powder bags connected by powder trails as well, in order to cause another series of explosions which would hopefully disable the function of the armory buildings. By the morning of April 18th, Union spies had reported to Jones and Kingsbury that a militia of nearly 300 Virginians had assembled less than 4 miles away under the command of Colonel Turner Ashby. A few moments after this was reported, Jones would receive a telegram from General Winfield Scott that 3 trains had passed Manassas Junction, bound for Harpers Ferry, and it was estimated that they carried between 2.5 and 3,000 Confederate troops. Overall command of the Confederate troops was given to Major General Kenton Harper, whose primary goal was to capture the armory and arsenal in order to supply his under-equipped army. At 9 p.m., Lieutenant Jones would send a telegram to General Winfield Scott. It read, "Sir, up to the present time, no assault or attempt to seize the government property here has been made, but there is decided evidence that the subject is in contemplation. At sundown this evening, several companies of troops had assembled at Halltown, about 3 or 4 miles from here. The last report is that the attack will be made tonight. My determination is to destroy what I cannot defend, and if the forces sent against me are clearly overwhelming, my present intention is to retreat to Pennsylvania." Just before 10 p.m., Jones had received word from Union sentries that the 300-man Confederate militia had reached Bolivar Heights, which was just west of Harpers Ferry. Shortly after 10 p.m., Jones ordered his men to light the powder trails in the armory and arsenal. The residents of Harpers Ferry were unexpectedly taken by surprise. Within moments, the 2 arsenal buildings were engulfed in flames, and the armory was not too far behind. Some people ran into the burning buildings attempting to save armaments to give to the Confederate troops, while others attempted to douse the flames because they wanted to save the armory. If the armory would be successfully destroyed, it would destroy Harpers Ferry's economy. A furious mob would gather and attempt to track down the members whom had participated in the destruction of the armory and arsenal. 4 of the members were captured, no one was killed or wounded. The rest of the members would successfully retreat to Pennsylvania and carry on to fight for the Union another day. After Lieutenant Jones arrived at Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, he would send a telegram to General Scott. "Finding my position untenable, shortly after 10 o'clock last night, I destroyed the arsenal containing 15,000 stand of arms, and burned up the armory building proper, and under the cover of night withdrew my command almost in the presence of 2,500 or 3,000 troops. This was accomplished with but 4 casualties. I believe the destruction must have been complete." The reports that Jones had received were very accurate. On the morning of April 19th, nearly 3,000 Confederates occupied Harpers Ferry, and by that evening it had swelled up to 5,000 troops. The 5,000 Confederate troops would arrive at Harpers Ferry intending to obtain weapons and not machinery, but they ended up leaving Harpers Ferry with machinery and not weapons. If you're curious as to how effective Lieutenant Jones' actions were that night, in 1959, the location of the small arsenal building was excavated and many artifacts were identified, including a series of muskets that had actually melted together under the intense heat of the flames that night. With that point having been made, hopefully you have enjoyed this video. If so, why not leave a like and comment down below? Have a wonderful day.